Hi, how are you? Welcome to the French Revolution. Today our contestants are the nobles and the peasants. They're from pre-revolutionary France, which was a pretty weird place. It basically consisted of the nobles and the peasants. This is the noble, who is noble in its tiger, and it's the peasant, who is peasant in trait. There's a scarcity of food, which is why he is cooking this rat. It's what we imagine rats looked like in France in the 1700s. It was mostly agriculture. There was absolute monarchy, which was ruled by kings with the help of these guys right here, nobles. There were dress codes, like in a bad high school. There were dress codes. Look how elegant. This is actually a Dior suit, tailored from the finest leather. It doesn't look like leather though, which is why it's so fine. And it's just a shimmering glimpse of elegance in the modern age. And that's the French Revolution for you. There were 400,000 nobles divided two ways. Nobles of the sword, who were gonna lift that up, and then I'm gonna start talking again. There were 400,000 nobles divided two ways. There were the nobles of the sword, who were derived from military service, or the nobles of the robe, who had acquired this either by serving in bureaucracy or purchasing them. And there you had privileges, such as being exempt from tax, like the taille, which was a land tax, or the corvée, which was a forced labor tax. And that was just some stuff, there's a lot going on. Difficult period. Land. Land was the economic basis of 1700s life and the foundation of the power and the nobility. Now, the people who worked on the land were peasants such as this disgusting creature, who often had unfortunate objects thrown at them, like wigs and batteries, which apparently existed back then. That's not true, though. So, most of them were poor, because that's what peasants are, poor people, and it was still divided into a feudal system, like serfs, and they depended on the land, and they were able to live because they worked for the nobility. And the power of the landlord increased as you moved from west to east. And as you see there, the peasant is able to possibly distinguish west from east, though there is no compass present, so no one can be sure. Now, the nobles tried their best to preserve the exclusiveness of being a noble. They made it harder to become one. They had reserve appointments, so that the officers of armies and other things, they used the French Parliament to ensure that the government was supporting their nobility, and they would make the peasants pay them to do things.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Here is a modern interpretation of what it may have looked like to be a peasant.
No! Ow! My God! No! Ow! Can you get out of me?
Financial Minister Charles-Alexandre de Cavigny and his plan would have been awesome, but the nobles didn't like it. His plan was to tax the nobles and save the country. But unfortunately, yet again, the nobles didn't like it.
We're the Assembly of Nobles. No.
Oh, wait.
Yeah. Oh. John.
I'm going to give you an intro, don't worry. Okay. Louis, having no choice, because he couldn't tax the nobles because the Estates General had to approve that apparently, decided that he would call the Estates General.
Yeah, Estates General, you're having a problem. Like, I need you down here pretty soon, or my lion's gonna freak out. Thank you.
And thus, the Estates Generals came. The estates were divided. There were 3 estates, divided somehow, which was something. And those 3 estates were the nobles, the clergy, which looks exactly like Louis for some reason, and the peasants. Now, this was done on a class-by-class voting system, meaning that 2 classes had to outvote 1, or they had to vote unanimously. And thus, the clergy and the nobles would usually vote together to outvote the peasants, and thus no taxes were coming to them. The peasants were sad because they weren't getting political representation. This was because the voting in France was done by a class-to-class system in which it was the three classes versus one another. Actually it wasn't the nobles. It was the peasants who thought that the voting should be done by a head count because the Third Estate was the largest thing in France, and therefore anything they wanted would be voted for if they so needed it. And that's when the peasants came up with an idea.
Let's create the National Assembly.
And they even invited clergy and nobles who shared their political aspirations to join.
That's good. Yeah. Nobles.
Louis did the best he could to avoid letting the National Assembly write a new constitution.
It's blocked.
Oh no.
Whatever shall we do?
Peasants eventually found a meeting place on a nearby tennis court right outside of their original meeting place. This is what they had to say.
We will not leave until a new constitution is made.
It was a very short meeting. Louis XVI contemplated using royal troops in order to keep down the peasants and allow himself to regain control. This move created anxiety in civilians, and the food was becoming scarce. And thus, the revolution was about to be born. Bastille Prison. It had been it had become a symbol against the rebellion that was coming, and thus it had to be eliminated.
Wait. They just went to the place because they wanted weapons.
Yeah, Bastille Prison. In the time of the Revolution, or just before it actually, it had become a symbol for the oppression of the king. And then, one night, the upcoming National Assembly decided to use it to find weapons and free political prisoners. The militia went to the Bastille Prison in search of weapons. The soldiers of the Bastille Prison mistakenly fired into the audience, killing 98 civilians. The civilians stormed the prison, let loose its 5 prisoners, and killed its guards. And thus it was time for France to write a constitution, but before they could do that, they had to establish broad political principles based off of Virginia's adapted laws.
We want civic equality, and we want it now. We want popular sovereignty, and we want it now. We want to challenge the legal and social inequalities of European life, and assert that the governed must be responsible to the governed. And, except for women, that is.
It was rumored, by our group only, that there were many rejected ideas by the French peasants for these broad political principles.
Farewell, Frog Leg Friday. Snail Tuesday.
We need it. Hello. Bats and towels.
Yeah, that sounds good. Warm Bastille. Bubbles for the bear. That nice bubbles.
What do you think? Learning.
And thus, France finally had a constitution. Here is a reenactment of them showing it to Louis.
We have a constitution. It is for a constitutional monarchy with separation of powers.